So for our last session of the day, joining us for an insider's view of sustainability wins and the how to achieve them, please welcome Mary Anne Waterhouse and Louise Pollard.
See a fire. Is this on? Hi everyone, I'm Louise and Mary Anne, so thanks to SPF24 for having us. And look, really this is going to be a very hands-on session where we're going to hear firsthand from Mary Anne everything that she experienced on her recent Netflix production. So, with so many students in the audience today, we thought it'd be really important to give you lots of really robust examples and hopefully give you lots of actionable takeaways as you head out in, these emerging sustainability coordinators. So I think first off, for those of us who may have already worked with Netflix, hope to work with Netflix or will work with Netflix in the future, what was it like stepping into this production? And how did Netflix guide you on what they wanted?
So I've done quite a lot of work with Netflix in this particular project. They, many of you know Clara George, who's their sustainability person, who's wonderful and knows so much. But basically, they care. They have a net zero in place, and what that means is that they're purchasing offsets. So they're, both for the right reasons, but also for financial reasons, they're incredibly invested in diverting as much as possible. So we were really mandated to make the project as green as possible. We had a sustainability advisor on staff, like that was a position. And from the very earliest part, from the very beginning of even talking with, and this is when it matters, but from the very, very beginning, we were talking about what are the measures we were going to put in place to have as much waste diversion as possible and reduce fuel as much as possible. Reducing fuel was really important to them because that's where the numbers add up. And we, the reason that I'm the person sitting here talking is because, it was not just me, believe me, it was many, many people, and we're going to talk about them. But we had some pretty stupendous results. Like, it was really cool, and I'm really proud of it. This isn't the first show that I've tried to do this on. As I said, like, this is my third in a row of movies with Netflix, and all of them had this mandate, but it was finally the right time, the right place, the right group of people, which was a really big thing that we managed to, you'll see the stats. There we go. So there you can see our waste diversion stats, which are 91% diversion, only 9% waste. That we'll talk more about how that was achieved, but that's a pretty remarkable stat. And similarly, see, I can't see mine. We had grid tie-ins, which led to 29 metric tons of carbon saved, and a further 36 metric tons from using EVs and hybrids in our transport department.
So it's great that Netflix are buying into the idea of net zero and really embracing that, which is fantastic. And of course, it's in their interest for every production to do, to reduce their emissions as much as possible, to reduce that financial, outlay. So did they provide you with any sort of roadmap, or just basically said, make this a green production and focus on fuel reduction and waste? Did they give you guidelines?
Claire's awesome and she knows so much, but also I've, worked with them a few times, so they knew that I had ideas. So there wasn't a directive of exactly how these things had to be done. There was support for sure, and they provided a lot of support to the sustainability person who was relatively new to the role. Certainly they provided all of the tracking, all of the paperwork that we needed to do in order to actually quantify these numbers, and there was quite a lot of tracking that had to be done by that individual and by our accounting department. It was there some really specific. I mean, I think there's even some. I did a thing once showing the tracker that Clara designed for generators. You know, for generator comparisons. She's done some. Exactly, the DGC power budgeting tool. Yeah. So, you know, they have some really, I mean, proprietary, but they're not like proprietary about it, but, you know, ways to track this stuff. But anyway, the power of having them say, we want this to be as green as possible, we need to see something significant happen in your fuel reduction, was that I could say that with power to my department heads and say, this is what needs to be. This is not just me saying it would, this is not a would be nice, this is a part of your job. Like, we need to do this. And similarly, those department heads or those people working in it, especially the ones, and there were a few of them, I was lucky, who were really advocates, they could say the same thing. Like I told you, I overheard the ALM, and we'll talk, locations department is critical to all of this. I overheard the ALM on the phone to someone, literally using exactly that, saying, well, no, I'm on this Netflix show and it's like super green, so I have to do it that way. And I was like, yes, exactly. So having, and I say that for like anybody, I don't know exactly who is in the audience, but if you're in a position where, you know, this is the, you know, it's top down and bottom up both, right? Like, I'm in the middle. But if we have the studios and the, you know, financiers and the people there saying, we need this to happen, this has to be part of how you work. And then on the other side, we have the crew, you know, excited and executing. We'll talk about all that. But that's it. It has to come both directions.
Yeah, and that's really interesting how you said you had that sort of excitement from the crew and the cast as well. Did you feel that you were all working on this together to bring the results that Netflix were hoping for? And you had a sustainability coordinator, so what role did they play over and above what often is assumed? Oh, well, they're telling people where to put the waste, but what other impact did you feel the sustainability coordinator had in the process?
Well, so there's just so many questions in that.
Sorry.
The cast were definitely, in the show we had a young cast, and they were definitely, you know, equally excited too. I mean, there were people who were, you know, but there were, you know, a lot of people who were excited. And one of the things, so the fuel reduction is the piece, the generator, I mean, you know, I don't know what order to do these things in. We'll walk through the slides in a minute, I guess. But that stuff is the most, you know, directly impactful in terms of the volume of carbon offset, right? The amount of carbon reduced. But the waste diversion is the most visual. Like, it's the thing that everybody sees every day in the lunchroom. And I know that was, you know, the cast members, our young cast, were genuinely excited, like, haven't seen it laid out like this, and this is so great that we're doing it. So, but one of the things that the sustainability person did that is really important, and it's how you get that energy, is communication tools. Like giving a feedback loop to the crew, not at the end when we have all these stats, but as we're going, reporting how we're doing. So we did a weekly newsletter where it was a sustainability newsletter, and that, you know, was updating of what we achieved, just little things. We did this much better this week than last week. Particularly around both the fuel use and the diversion. And we got the waste diversion stats from our vendor every week, and we actually made, in addition to this, we made signage that we put up that said, you know, because we didn't get to 91 right away either, right? So people could see. It's sort of like, you know, those things where it's like, how many days since an accident? You know, like that, right? So, you know, saying we're at 67%. Because I remember one day hearing wardrobe people standing there, and they were talking about the stats, and they were like, I don't know, like, why are they saying that, or what does that mean? And the one said to the other, well, what they mean is that's what we could do if we sorted properly ourselves. And I was like, yes. So, I don't know, I'm just doing all the talking, I guess.
Well, no, but that's the plan.
Should we do the slides, do you think? Or
yeah, go through the slides. But as you do that, the question, some of the stories, I think these examples of what's happening firsthand on set is exciting. So, for example, you mentioned locations. How key were they in bringing about these really good results?
It absolutely, as I said at the beginning, I didn't really do any of this, right? Other people did all of it. I was just, that's my role, is to oversee it. The locations team was incredible in embracing it, and I really applaud them. And and the other two departments being the electrics department and specifically our rigging gaffer and our Jenny op, who really were also equally let's do this. If we're going to do it, let's do it. And our transportation department. I mean, those guys, they were scared, and that's a thing that I think we also have to remember, is people are scared to go out on these limbs. And so partly knowing that Netflix was supportive, I was supportive, those were the things that helped. But, and that's my role, is to make sure they know, I'm not going to let you be hung out to dry. We're going to put, precautions in place. We're going to have backup plans, and we can talk about what those were. But, that's what people need. People need to feel the resistance doesn't come from people saying, I don't care about the planet. It comes from people thinking that they're going to end up looking stupid or, doing a bad job or losing their job. Those are the things that people are scared of, right? All right, let me see what. So there we go. These are the things that we did, I guess. And the biggest things we did were tie-ins to the grid. We did grid tie-ins for our base camp for the entire show. I didn't have a base camp generator one day on our 37 days of shooting. I was amazed that we could do that, but we got lucky, but then luck is planning, right? So we really started early to think about where our locations were, how close they were together, and that wonderful ALM I mentioned found us a lot with an industrial building adjacent to it, and made it, approached that person and made a deal that we could tie into. They had, verified with our electrics department that they had sufficient power, and we did a tie-in where one did not exist. We created it, we had it, ESA approved, and that became our power source for all of our location days for our base camp. And we all worked to find locations that were close enough, that were reasonable. We were in studio 7 days, so we moved out to the studio, went back, same base camp, same tie-in. So that was massive, right? That's the biggest part of our power usually goes to that base camp. So yes, prep.
I think another interesting example was the use of EVs, because
Absolutely.
I know that charge anxiety is really a big part of the resistance. Can you tell us more about how you managed to sort of give transport the comfort they needed?
Yeah, I'm really, I'm so proud of those guys because they were nervous. We were in Hamilton, and we were driving cast from Toronto, and they're like, you want us to drive cast from Toronto in an EV? How is this going to work? But you can. It's, it's not too far. And we installed, so we had every one of our cast vehicles. We don't, large passenger vans, there's not availability, but the cars, we drove the casting cars, mostly in Teslas, and we installed level 2 chargers. You can rent them from almost all the suppliers now, White's, MBS, Starline, they all rent you portable chargers that plug right into your cam locks. So we had those at base camp and at where our work trucks were, so that the vehicles that transport was using, but also ones that the crew were using, and we encouraged as many crew as possible to have either a hybrid plug-in or a EV. But it was still okay, great. I mean, those tier 2s take a long time to charge. What if I need a driver to turn back around? What if there's an accident and they've used all their charge up by the time they get here? Seems like a bad plan. So what we did at first, and honestly after a week and a half, they're like, we don't need that anymore. But what I offered them and we did was, let's have 2 extra cars. Let's just have 2 extra cars plugged in, fully charged at the base camp, just like having spare batteries. And if you get there and your car needs a charge, you just swap and you jump in the other. And that gave everybody, they're like, really? I'm like, we're renting 2 more cars. And it costs some money, but in the end, we saved, I mean, I don't know if I'm actually supposed to say the numbers. I don't know.
Say them.
Well, I mean, they're not that massive either, but we saved in the tens of thousands in both departments when you took the actual hydro costs and the cost we paid for the hydro or in the case of vehicles, what we paid to we had accounts with like Flow and ChargePoint and stuff. So when you took those costs plus the extra cost of what the vehicles are versus a different vehicle, compared to what the normal rental cost and the fuel would be, that was over $20,000 anyway, on the vehicles alone, and then similar number in the case of the generators, and that was where you take, and in that case we also had for comfort for that department, we had a generator over there, please don't use it, but just in case, and people were like, well, what if there's a power outage, right? So like, okay, so we have that just in case there wasn't a power outage. That similarly, when we took the cost of that hydro, because of course we had to pay the guy whose power we were using at the base camp, and we also tied in at one of our primary locations. So for our set power for a location that we were at for more than half the shoot, we were tied in there as well. So taking the cost of the hydro, the cost of those tie-ins, right, which is not nothing. I mean, there's a rental cost, there's an install cost, so all of that. But taking that stuff into account relative to the fuel cost, and not even the generator cost, because I had that thing sitting there as a backup anyway, right? That was still a significant savings. So paying a little more for the cars, paying to rent these portable chargers, it can be covered from within your budget through those other savings.
And I think that, what you're saying is giving people a little more fodder with other productions to say there are productions out there that have absolute bottom line benefits from a pure dollar perspective over and above the environmental benefit.
Exactly. It's real. Like, hydro is cheaper than gas. Look how expensive gas is, right? Like, it just is. That's not a pretend thing. That's just a real thing. And it's like we got lucky. Like, it doesn't, if you were at a location for 2 or 3 days, installing a tie-in isn't going to be the right solution. Maybe there's a battery solution instead or something else. For us, tie-ins were the best solution because we had the advantage of time in these places. But no matter what, hydro is cheaper than gas, and we proved it.
Did you notice any shift in attitudes in, say, transport when they were driving Teslas? Did people feel a little more sexy?
Well, I do have one little anecdote of that. Literally on day 1, I was at the crew park, and one of the crew, I think it was a guy in camera, was looking around for the shuttle, and this Tesla pulled up, and I was just walking by, and he's like, wait, that's the shuttle? And he got really excited, and he was like, where do I sit? Where do I go?
How do I open the door?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I will say the one other awesome thing, my transport captain was so nervous about doing this, and did it anyway, and it really, bless his heart. But the most, my best thing about all this was that about probably 6 weeks ago now, but like, we finished this show back in May. About 6 weeks ago, he texted me and said, how much money did doing all that thing save us? And I'm like, well, and it wasn't a ton, but it was this much after we tallied everything. And he's like, because I'm starting a new show and I want to try to talk them into it. And I was like, you didn't even want to do this. So that was an awesome thing. Yeah.
So it sounds like there were, all these wins, and then at the end of the day, Netflix did they pat you on the back and say, the results are, I mean, maybe that's a big ask.
Yeah.
But, you know, the fact is they're going to look at it as a numbers game.
They were very
you know?
happy. Absolutely,
Yeah.
they were very happy. And they were happy. And I mean, even in the city of Hamilton, the place that we did that tie-in, you know, they are happy that that is going to be identified by them. Like, we did not, obviously, we had a rental piece of equipment in there. That wasn't left behind. But the infrastructure to make it easy for someone else to bring and plug in that was left behind. So they're going to identify that to future. Like the lot itself was actually a city lot, and then the building was privately owned, and we made the power deal with the adjacent building. And that's, like I said, that was the locations. Like, it was all these, and I didn't talk, you know, the electrics department had to buy in too. They were scared too, of course, right? And also there's a lot to talk about around what's happening with the Jenny Ott position, and, you know, that's an important thing as well. I mean, I talked about this to other people, like you know, we did end up having only one Jenny Op, not two. That was, you know, for most, well, yeah, no, for the entire show, actually. But our Jenny Op started like 3 weeks before we went to camera, which is unheard of. Like, that person ended up with much more employment because they had to be working with the rigging team and getting all of this stuff in place, right? So it's a shift, right? There's some shifts.
So you mentioned Netflix really highlighted fuel reduction. That was a big focus for them. There was the win on waste. Did you find with those focuses that there was a trickle down that, you know, I mean, obviously you were focused on every aspect of the production, but did you find within cast and crew, you know, from the food to the set
Yeah, I mean,
construction,
we
it was
were
all
doing,
kind of happening?
Yeah, everybody, exactly. Like, everybody knew, and those were the biggest things. But yes, we used plates at catering. We did have takeouts hidden if people needed them, but they could have them. But we did all of those pieces as well. And it did, everyone knew, you know, you're right, in the, you know, costumes, you know, and our sustainability person does a lot of that work too, right? Like, going to the departments about what do you have that can be, you know, that, like, give me your list of things you're going to, you know, the topic before this, give me your list of things that you're going to need to get rid of. I'll try to find homes for it ahead of time. We did our show, here's a good one. We did our show.
Good.
We did our show during, when the eclipse happened. We were shooting that day. So we got everybody the glasses because I knew they're going to go out there and look, and I better keep them safe. So we got glasses for everyone. And then the sustainability person on her own found, through some research, a place in South America where there was going to be another eclipse in a few months, and they were collecting the glasses. So we collected them all up and sent them off to South America so that people down there could use them for their eclipse.
Oh, well, that was great.
Yeah. Oh yes, we got to get back to so. I keep turning around. But this is these are the stats regarding our waste diversion. As I said, 91% ultimately, and this is you know, I don't know how familiar you are. This requires on set. You know, as best as possible, we have our 3 different types of bins, right? You have more over there, but we have 3. We have the landfill, the recyclables, and the green organics, and then our supplier. And there is more than one that do this. We use one. I know of 2 for sure that provide this service, but I think a 3rd one is offering as well, where they hand sort. That's a yucky job, but they hand sort it afterwards. And by doing so, you know, they're not able to get to 100%, but our stuff was, because some stuff is so contaminated, but our stuff was decent enough that we got as high as 91% through them hand sorting. Yeah.
But it is great, that point they made, that if by doing a good job on set,
Exactly.
you're minimising the hand sorting at the other end of the line.
And and I really want to highlight this one. The food waste, I mean, it's the one thing people often, feels like a bridge too far, and so sets will have their recyclables, and, you know, we're recycling the paper and the plastic, but not the food waste. And the food waste is even worse, right, because of the toxic greenhouse gases that come off of that. So if you're going to actually divert anything, like, please divert the food waste. And if you looked at our percentages, the food waste was actually a much higher percentage than the rest of it. I mean, it's a lot of food on sets, right? There's all day long hours, and unfortunately a lot of it goes to waste. We did food rescue as well, but that's, it's still, you're not rescuing something that, was sitting out on on a serving tray or on someone's plate. So this was a big one. Yeah. This is more of the detail of how it happens, like, how it physically happens, and it's even as simple as the color of the bags is how we identify the bags are, it's all done. I can't quite read it from there, but this is literally how an extra 56% was saved because of the hand sorting. Like, if we hadn't done, we would have been only at 35% if we hadn't done the sorting.
So another thing I think you mentioned, Netflix do their own in-house sort of data entry and analysis, as opposed to using like an Albert or a Pear or a Peach. Was that my understanding?
Yeah, there's very specific paperwork. I mean, honestly, I can't even say if ultimately someone there translates it into one of those things at the end, but it's not what we at the production level are using. We're filling out their specific forms in terms of reporting on every department, all of our data and usages, particularly in transport and fuel use, but in all.
And did you find that very rigorous, or it wasn't too much of a burden?
It's quite a bit, but that is on the sustainability person. So, like I said, I didn't do the stuff. That's a joke. And then, yes, you see, there's this is the detail. This is the level of detail that we get from the kind of data that we were getting from our waste vendor and communicating back to crew in terms of actual real results. Because if people know, like, that's another, I mean, I'm sure you've all heard it a million times, right? Oh, there's no point in putting it in that bin. It all goes to the same place anyway. It's not really getting recycled. Like, that's what, and it sadly does happen sometimes, but by really doing this and giving the feedback loop that people knew it was happening, they then did more. And I know some people took it home with them too, like the practices. Like, I had people talk about that. And this is the composting piece of it. See, incredible data. And notice that their things are going to different facilities too. These guys don't take everything just to the closest depot. They take it to the one that's going to actually deal with the type of waste that we have. That really varies between municipalities, so that's an important piece. And these vendors know how that piece works. And then our paper was done through Paper Savers. Yeah, I think it was all those people, all those departments.
But I think this is an example of having the support of Netflix, so that it was a directive and everyone knew that you were on the same page with this. But did you have any pain points? Because I think everybody who's going out to production is still, everybody wants to do this, but there's always those barriers to succeed. Is there anything that you really found was a struggle, even though you had such a very strong directive from Netflix?
Well, I mean, yes, like, obviously I'll go back one maybe in that we got really, I keep saying lucky. Like, this was the best that I've ever been able to achieve. And I've tried these things on shows before. And, it was, I think it's partly, it's like one of those things that's time has come. Like, people have heard about it enough that they really do want to try it on. They were excited. Some of those department heads were like, I've always wanted to actually be empowered to do it. I just, haven't had the chance. But I've certainly, I've had, so I'm not trying to be like, both of the movies before, we set out with big intentions and high hopes, and we were going to do, and you get busy, right? And everyone, that's why it has to start so early, because it can't be a thing that at the last week before you go to camera, you're trying to like throw it on people or throw it in. People are way too busy. It has to be like ingrained in how they're approaching their job from like their first day of work, that, okay, I need to think about this before I make a choice. That's, and that's, I think that's why on the 2 shows before, it was much less successful, and on this particular one, we just had so much better results.
Which is certainly starting to occur, particularly with mandated carbon footprint reporting as one example. And as I sit here, I think back to last year's forum when David Miller was the keynote speaker, and he spoke very much about, look, we can have all the data in the world, which is important to collect, but our goal should be net zero. And how can we get there in the most realistic way, as in what Netflix is doing?
No, and exactly. No,
Yeah.
and I do, like, I love this model that they've created, really, because it is, like, we know that that's being achieved, and there's a financial, they've created that for themselves, a financial incentive to actually do it on the ground, right? Yeah. And we know that our results are going to end up with a project that is net zero, but we're just making it better, right? Like, it's, I think it's a wonderful model.
Yeah, and it's finding those offsets, or, as Alex from Bullfrog was talking about, the energy credits, what are those legitimate ways to get to net zero? And, hopefully Netflix is doing it in the most legitimate way as far as their researched, how they're getting to net zero. It's not, that term greenwashing, it's really a very well thought through.
Well, yes, exactly. Meaningful. And but that's kind of why also that I'm really excited about doing this piece of it, right? Because we know what we did with this piece of it.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. And, I think sort of as we get closer to cocktail hour, and people might be getting restless, just as a wrap up, going into future productions, what are those key pieces that you think are integral to any production? And I think everyone here, if you could sort of wave that magic wand as you step into your next production without a Netflix behind you, what do you see as those key pieces to really, really fight for? Because you've got to choose those battles when you're busy and you're working hard.
Yeah. No, I think the waste reduction and organics reduction, because you can. Like, don't tell me you can't do that. That's something, and even if you can't afford to pay for someone to sort it, you can still have all 3 types of bins. You're making waste. You can, that to me, that's the low-hanging fruit. But the other, and so I kind of broke it into these 3 things. The generator, reducing generator reliance, there's all kinds of ways to do it. We like I said, focus on tie-ins, but using different forms of lighting, and also, that's another, we didn't do that. We didn't use LEDs, because this show was, because I can't give away too much about it, but this show was set in the 80s, and our lighting, our DP wanted to light using lighting from the 80s, or to make that look. So we didn't compromise the creative. We just plugged, for that, all of that time when we were using that stuff, we were plugged into grid power. So it doesn't mean you have to compromise creative, but finding ways through LEDs where maybe you don't even need that level of volume of power, right? Through tie-ins, through batteries, which I'm sure were discussed today, really just, not running that generator, or running a much smaller generator, like, right sizing your generator, all of that, that's the other big piece. And then the cars, the transport department. Like, hydro is cheaper than gas, it just is. And the tools exist out there now. Like, a year ago was a lot harder, frankly. Like, literally, when I sat here, I did a different conversation last year. It was harder to be able to, to run a fleet of electric vehicles. They weren't as available. Rome has made a big difference there. They're very readily available now. I can rent as many as I need. And the availability of these cute little portable chargers on, like, little dollies that you take and plug in. You can charge your cars wherever we have power, we can charge the cars.
And driving force are here.
Yeah,
As
yes,
another.
exactly.
They have a fleet, so
Yeah.
all that pushback on, there aren't enough EVs available. There are.
Yes, I mean, if we wanted to end on some kind of a good news note, last year I was like, we don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the infrastructure. I can't get the stuff. And we can't get everything yet. There's lots that's not, but it's dramatically changed in 1 year.
Yeah, and I was saying to somebody earlier, you know, with mandating of carbon footprint reporting, why not start thinking about productions being mandated to ease into this EV world, and every production has to have a minimum of 25% EVs or hybrids. I mean, and just push productions into making these choices and then seeing firsthand the benefits and realising that there is a real cost saving as well as the environmental upside to this.
Yes, exactly.
It's, you know, I think plenty of freedom under strict supervision. That's how it has to be. Well,
Okay.
I think that's a wrap on this.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you so much for that non-fireside chat. It was phenomenal and always great to hear. Thank you everyone for an incredible day. You all have just been so passionate and just by being here. And really that is the first step. So thank you for being with all of us and to all the speakers as well, sharing so much information and just all the collaboration that's happening in this room without us even knowing it. So it's amazing. So now please enjoy the networking and cocktail reception sponsored by Rethink Resource and hospitality partners Verkaskrut and Lost Craft. But quickly, before we head off for a fun little hobnob, and I might be aging myself with that word, so networking, I'd like to invite Melanie back up to just say a few final words. Thank you so much.
So a special thanks to the amazing CBC team for their support in making this event happen, including Barbara Williams, Ruthie Calarco, David Oil, Athena Trestellis, Lisa Clarkson, Bruce Barrett, Matthew Modica, Paul Grant, and everyone working behind the scenes. I am so proud, yes. I am so proud of the Sustainable Entertainment Society and the Sustainable Production Forum team. You are the superstars, and this work wouldn't be possible without your dedication and creative thinking. So thank you. Lastly, thank you to our partners, vendors, and sponsors, Green Spark Group, CBC Radio-Canada, Telefilm Canada, Ontario Green Screen, Real Green Creative BC, and the Province of British Columbia, Directors Guild of Canada National, Independent Production Fund, BCTQ Rolling Green, Canada Media Fund, Rethink Resource, City of Toronto, Sunbelt Rentals International, Bullfrog Power, Producing for the Planet, Vancouver Film Studios, BC Environmental Film Festival, IATSE Local 891, ACSAFE Safety Association, Canadian Media Producers Association, UBCP ACTRA, Green Eyes Production, Producers Guild of America, Killer Greens, Consulate General of Switzerland in Vancouver, BIPOC TV and Film, Capilano University, Canadian Film Centre, Pacific Screenwriting Programmer, Humber Polytechnic, the Sustainable Act, the Tie-In, Driving Force, Krypton Rental Group, Valid Manufacturing, Green Toolkit, Stream Water, Muse, Earth Group, Zatar Wizwit, Lost Craft, and Location Fixer. Oh man, I love you. And finally, thank you to all of the dreamers, creators, and innovators working to reimagine a better world. Merci, Toronto.